Daniel Wright stood in the doorway of the restaurant, his hand frozen on the handle, every instinct screaming at him to turn around and drive home. Inside, somewhere among the dim lighting and couples leaning close over candlelit tables, sat a woman he'd never met, a woman his best friend swore was perfect for him, which probably meant she'd take one look at his oil-stained work boots and make an excuse about an early morning. He was a 32-year-old mechanic who smelled like engine grease no matter how hard he scrubbed, a single father who hadn't been on a real date in 3 years, and he was about to walk into what would almost certainly be the most awkward hour of his life. But what happened in the next 2 hours would change everything he thought he knew about second chances, about being seen for who he really was, and about the kind of love that doesn't run when life gets complicated. If you want to see how a blind date meant to be a joke became the foundation for something real, stay with me until the end, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me tell you about the night Daniel Wright almost stayed home. The February air bit through Daniel's jacket as he finally pulled open the restaurant door, telling himself he could always fake a work emergency if things went south in the first 5 minutes. The warmth inside hit him immediately. That, and the soft jazz playing over speakers he couldn't see, the murmur of conversation from tables he tried not to look at too closely. He'd chosen this place specifically because it wasn't fancy, wasn't the kind of spot where people wore suits or ordered wine he couldn't pronounce. Just a neighborhood Italian place with red vinyl booths and checkered tablecloths. The kind of restaurant where a guy in work boots wouldn't stand out too much. The hostess, a young woman with a bright smile that seemed genuine, looked up from her podium. "Can I help you?" "I'm meeting someone," Daniel said, his voice coming out rougher than he'd intended. He cleared his throat. "Reservation should be under Marcus." Her smile widened like she knew something he didn't. "Oh, you're Daniel. She's already here. Right this way." The walk to the table felt longer than it should have. Daniel's palms were sweating despite the cold he'd just left behind, and he was hyper-aware of every sound his boots made on the hardwood floor. He ran through his escape strategies one more time: work emergency, babysitter cancellation, sudden onset food poisoning, knowing he'd probably use one of them before dessert. Then the hostess stopped beside a booth near the back, and Daniel saw her. Mia Harper sat with her hands wrapped around a water glass, her dark hair falling past her shoulders in waves that caught the low light. She wore a simple blue sweater and jeans, no makeup that he could see, and when she looked up at him, her eyes were the kind of warm brown that reminded him of autumn leaves and quiet Sunday mornings. She smiled, and it wasn't the practiced smile of someone trying to impress a date. It was nervous and real and somehow made the knot in Daniel's chest loosen just slightly. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You must be Daniel." "That's me." He slid into the booth across from her, suddenly aware of how big his hands looked resting on the table. "Sorry if I kept you waiting." "You didn't. I was early." Mia set down her water glass. "Marcus warned me you might try to bail at the last second, so I figured I'd get here first, make it harder for you to escape." Daniel felt his eyebrows rise. "He told you that?" "He told me a lot of things." Her smile turned slightly mischievous. "Like how you've been dodging his attempts to set you up for the past year, and how you only agreed to this because he threatened to show up at your garage with a marching band if you said no again." Despite himself, Daniel laughed. "That sounds like Marcus. What else did he tell you?" "That you're a good father, that you work too hard, that you're loyal to a fault and terrible at asking for help." Mia tilted her head, studying him with an openness that should have made him uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. "He also said you'd probably spend the first 20 minutes looking for an excuse to leave, so I should just get that out of the way now. If you want to go, you can go. No hard feelings." The honesty of it caught Daniel off guard. He'd expected small talk, the usual dance of first date conversation where everyone pretended to be slightly better versions of themselves. Not this, not someone calling out his escape plan before he could even use it. "I'm not going anywhere," he heard himself say, and realized he meant it. The waitress appeared then, saving him from having to explain why he'd just committed to staying when 5 minutes ago he'd been planning his exit. They ordered, Daniel getting the spaghetti because it was safe and familiar, Mia choosing the chicken marsala after asking the waitress 3 questions about how it was prepared. When the waitress left, Mia caught Daniel looking at her and shrugged. I'm picky about mushrooms, she said. My roommate says I interrogate servers like I'm conducting a criminal investigation. Your roommate sounds like she knows you pretty well. We've lived together for 4 years, so yeah. Mia took a sip of her water. What about you? Marcus said you have a son? There it was, the moment that usually ended things before they could begin. Daniel had learned the hard way that single father was a deal breaker for most women his age. They wanted someone available, someone whose life wasn't already spoken for by school pickups and bedtime routines and the 1,000 small responsibilities that came with raising a child alone. Yeah, Daniel said, watching her face for the shift that always came, the subtle retreat, the polite interest that masked disappointment. Carter, he's 6. But Mia's expression didn't change. If anything, she leaned forward slightly. 6 is a great age, old enough to have real conversations, but young enough that everything's still kind of magic, right? That's exactly it. Daniel felt something ease in his chest. Last week he spent 20 minutes explaining to me why dinosaurs would definitely win in a fight against dragons. He had charts and everything. Who won? Dinosaurs, but only because dragons aren't real, and Carter has very strong opinions about the importance of scientific accuracy. Mia laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made other people look over and smile without knowing why. He sounds amazing. What's he into besides dinosaurs? And just like that, they were talking. Really talking, not of the careful exchange of resume highlights that Daniel had come to expect from dating. Mia asked about Carter with genuine curiosity, what he liked for breakfast, whether he was in sports, if he'd inherited Daniel's apparent gift for fixing things. She didn't ask about Carter's mother, didn't probe into the story Daniel usually had to explain within the first half hour. She just listened when Daniel talked about his son, and her attention felt like the rarest gift. When Daniel asked about her work, Mia's whole face changed. She was a graphic designer, she explained, mostly freelance but with a few regular clients who kept her busy. She loved the creative freedom of it, the way she could work from anywhere. But sometimes she missed having coworkers and the structure of an office. I spend a lot of time talking to my cat, she admitted. He's a terrible colleague. Never meets deadlines, constantly sleeping on my keyboard, zero professional boundaries. What's his name? Fitzgerald. After F's Scott. Not because he's particularly literary, but because when I adopted him, the shelter said he was great but complicated, which seemed fitting. Daniel smiled. Is he? Great but complicated? Mostly he's just spoiled and opinionated. But yeah, I guess we all are in our own ways. The food arrived and they ate while they talked, the conversation flowing so easily that Daniel forgot to monitor the time or plan his exit. Mia told him about growing up in a small town upstate, about parents who'd supported her art even when they didn't understand it, about a younger brother who was currently teaching English in Japan and sending her pictures of vending machines at 2 a.m. Family's important to you, Daniel observed, watching the way her expression softened when she talked about them. Yeah, Mia said. Is that weird? I feel like everyone my age is supposed to be running away from their hometown, but I actually miss it sometimes. The quiet. Knowing everyone at the grocery store. She paused, pushing marsala sauce around her plate. What about you? You close with your family? My parents are in Florida, retired early and moved down there about 5 years ago. Daniel set down his fork. We talk every week, and they visit for Carter's birthday, but day to day it's mostly just me and him. My sister's in California, married with 2 kids of her own. So you're doing the single parent thing without much backup. It wasn't a question, but Daniel nodded anyway. Yeah, it's just us. That must be hard. Sometimes. Daniel met her eyes. But it's also the best thing that ever happened to me. Carter, I mean, being his dad. Mia smiled, and there was something in her expression that Daniel couldn't quite read. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Marcus said you were good at it, being a father. Marcus talks too much. Maybe, but I don't think he's wrong. They split a tiramisu for dessert, both of them reaching for the last bite at the same time, and then laughing about it like teenagers. When the check came, Daniel grabbed it before Mia could protest, but she insisted on leaving the tip, and they compromised in a way that felt practiced even though they'd just met. Outside, the February cold had deepened into something sharp and clear. Daniel's truck sat in the parking lot next to what he assumed was Mia's sedan, a practical gray Honda with a coexist bumper sticker and another one that just said, "Be kind." "So," Mia said, pulling her coat tighter around herself, "this wasn't terrible." "No," Daniel agreed. "It really wasn't." "Marcus is going to be unbearable about this. You know that, right?" "Oh, definitely. I'm never going to hear the end of it." They stood there in the cold, neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. Daniel shoved his hands in his pockets to keep from doing something stupid like reaching for hers. "Can I ask you something?" Mia's breath made small clouds in the air between them. "Sure." "Why did you almost not come tonight?" Daniel considered lying, or deflecting, or giving her one of the easy answers he had perfected over the years. But something about the way she'd been honest with him all evening made him want to return the favor. "Because I'm tired," he said finally. "Because dating when you have a kid is complicated, and most people don't want complicated. Because the last few times I tried this, it didn't end well, and I wasn't sure I wanted to put myself through it again." He looked at her, this woman he'd known for barely 2 hours but who somehow felt familiar. "Why did you agree to meet me?" Mia was quiet for a moment, her eyes searching his face. "Because Marcus said you were real, and I'm tired of people who aren't." Something passed between them then, an understanding maybe, or just the recognition that they were both here despite their better judgment, both taking a chance on something that might not work out but might be worth it anyway. "I'd like to see you again," Daniel said. "If you want." "I want?" Mia smiled. "What does your schedule look like?" "Complicated. I work most weekdays, and I have Carter every day except alternate weekends when he's with his grandparents." "Okay, what if we did coffee on Saturday morning? Somewhere Carter-friendly, if you want to bring him. Or if you'd rather keep this separate for now, I understand." The fact that she'd offered both options, that she wasn't running from the reality of his life, made Daniel's chest tight. "Let me think about it. The Carter part, I mean. Saturday works either way." "Fair enough." Mia pulled out her phone. "Give me your number?" They exchanged contact information, their fingers fumbling slightly in the cold. When they were done, Mia looked up at him one more time. "Thanks for not bailing," she said. "Thanks for making me glad I didn't." She drove away first, her taillights disappearing into the February darkness. Daniel sat in his truck for a long moment before starting the engine, his phone already lighting up with a text from Marcus that just said, "Well?" He'd answer his friend later. Right now, he just wanted to sit with the unexpected lightness in his chest, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about second chances. Check. The coffee shop Mia suggested for Saturday turned out to be exactly the kind of place Daniel would have chosen himself. Mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and a play area in the back corner where a handful of kids were already building elaborate block towers. Carter spotted it immediately when they walked in. "Dad, can I—" "After you say hi," Daniel said, one hand on his son's shoulder. "Remember what we talked about?" Carter, who'd been vibrating with excitement since Daniel told him they were meeting a new friend, nodded seriously. He was wearing his favorite dinosaur shirt and the sneakers that lit up when he walked, his dark hair sticking up in the back no matter how much Daniel had tried to smooth it down. Mia was already there, sitting at a table near the window with 2 coffees and what looked like a hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and sprinkles. She stood when she saw them, and Daniel watched his son take her in with the frank assessment that only 6-year-olds could manage. "Hi, Carter," Mia said, crouching down to his eye level. "I'm Mia. Your dad told me you're the world's leading expert on dinosaurs." Carter's eyes went wide. "Did he tell you about my dinosaur encyclopedia?" "He mentioned it. He said you know all their scientific names." "I do. Want to hear?" "Absolutely. But maybe after you have some hot chocolate?" Mia gestured to the table. "I wasn't sure if you liked whipped cream, so I got extra on the side." "I love whipped cream." Carter climbed into the chair she'd pulled out for him, already reaching for the mug. "This is the best coffee shop ever." Daniel caught Mia's eye over his son's head, and she smiled, a small private smile that said she understood what a big deal this was, introducing them. He mouthed, "Thank you," and she just shook her head slightly, like this was nothing, like making a 6-year-old feel welcome was the easiest thing in the world. For the next hour, Daniel watched his son fall in love with Mia almost as fast as he was falling himself. She listened to Carter's dinosaur facts with genuine interest, asked follow-up questions that proved she was actually paying attention, and didn't talk down to him the way some adults did with kids. When Carter got whipped cream on his nose, she handed him a napkin instead of wiping it off herself, respecting his independence in a way that Daniel noticed and appreciated. "Can I go play now?" Carter asked eventually, eyeing the block area. "Sure, buddy. Stay where I can see you." Carter scrambled down from his chair and raced toward the toys, leaving Daniel and Mia alone for the first time since Monday night. "He's wonderful," Mia said softly. "He likes you. That's not a small thing. I like him too." She watched Carter carefully stack blocks into what appeared to be a dinosaur habitat. "Thank you for letting me meet him. I know that's not easy." Daniel wrapped his hands around his coffee mug. "You made it easy. The way you talked to him, treated him like a person instead of just some kid, that matters." "Of course he's a person, a pretty cool person from what I can tell." They fell into comfortable conversation after that, the kind that picked up where Monday's dinner had left off. Mia told him about a logo design she was working on for a local bookstore, and Daniel described the 1967 Mustang that had been sitting in his garage for 3 months waiting for parts. Every few minutes, one of them would glance over at Carter, making sure he was still happily occupied, and then return to their conversation like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Can I ask you something?" Mia said eventually. "You keep asking if you can ask me things. You can just ask." She smiled. "Okay, what happened with Carter's mom? You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but I figure I should know the basics if we're going to keep doing this." Daniel had known this question was coming. It always did, usually accompanied by judgment or pity or uncomfortable silence. But Mia asked it the way she asked everything else, straightforward and honest, giving him the space to answer or not. "We weren't together long," he said. "Met at a party, dated for a few months, and then she got pregnant. We tried to make it work, got married too fast for the wrong reasons, and split up before Carter was 2. He paused, making sure he said the next part right. "She's not a bad person. She just wasn't ready to be a parent. Didn't want to be, really. She signed over full custody when we divorced, pays child support, sends birthday cards. But she doesn't visit, doesn't call. It's been 4 years since Carter saw her last. That must be hard for him. Sometimes. Mostly, he doesn't remember it being any different. It's always just been me and him. And you've been doing it alone all this time." "My parents help when they can. Marcus and his wife have Carter over sometimes. But yeah, mostly it's just us." Mia was quiet for a moment, and Daniel braced himself for what usually came next. The retreat, the realization that he came with too much baggage, that loving him meant signing up for a ready-made family instead of building something from scratch. But Mia just reached across the table and squeezed his hand once, briefly. "That's a lot to carry. We manage. I can see that." She glanced over at Carter, who was now explaining his block creation to another child with the passion of a museum tour guide. "He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him." They stayed another half hour until Carter had exhausted the possibilities of the block area and was starting to get that restless energy that meant he needed to run around outside. Daniel paid for the drinks despite Mia's protests, and they walked out into the bright Saturday morning together. "What are you two doing the rest of the day?" Mia asked. "Grocery shopping, laundry, the usual weekend stuff. Exciting, right?" "Sounds perfect, actually." She crouched down to Carter's level again. "It was really nice to meet you, Carter. Thanks for teaching me about dinosaurs." "You're welcome. Are you coming over again?" "If your dad invites me, maybe." Carter looked up at Daniel with the kind of hope that could break a grown man's heart. "Can she, Dad?" "We'll see, buddy. Say goodbye to Mia." "Bye, Mia." Carter threw his arms around her neck in an impulsive hug that made her laugh and hug him back. When he ran ahead to the truck, Mia stood and looked at Daniel. "He's special." "Yeah, he is. I meant what I said about wanting to do this again. Even knowing it's complicated?" "Daniel." She said his name like it meant something. "I'm 30 years old. I've dated enough uncomplicated guys to know that simple isn't always better. I like you. I like Carter. I want to see where this goes, if you do." Daniel felt that tightness in his chest again, the feeling that maybe he'd been protecting himself from exactly this, from someone who might actually stay. I want that too. Good. Mia pulled out her phone. Text me later. Let me know when you're free next. I will. She walked to her car, turning back once to wave. Carter waved enthusiastically from the truck, and Daniel waved too, feeling like something fundamental had shifted in his carefully ordered world. Dad? Carter's voice was small when Daniel climbed into the driver's seat. Yeah, buddy? I really like Mia. Can she be our friend? Daniel started the engine, pulling out of the parking lot as he considered how to answer. I like her too. And yeah, I think she can be our friend. Good. Carter settled back in his booster seat, satisfied. She's nice. And she didn't pretend to like dinosaurs. She actually wanted to know stuff. Smart kid, Daniel thought, noticing the things that mattered. They spent the rest of the weekend doing ordinary things. Grocery shopping, where Carter convinced Daniel to buy dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets. Laundry, where Carter helped fold towels with the intense concentration he brought to everything. A visit to the park, where Carter burned off energy on the playground while Daniel pushed him on the swings and thought about dark hair and warm eyes and someone who saw his life as it was and didn't flinch. Sunday night, after Carter was in bed, Daniel sat on his couch with his phone in his hand for longer than he wanted to admit before finally typing out a message to Mia. Carter declared you officially cool, high praise from a 6-year-old dinosaur expert. Her response came quickly. I'm honored. How was the rest of your weekend? Good. Quiet. Yours? Worked on the bookstore logo. Fitzgerald knocked over my water glass twice. Living the dream. Daniel smiled at his phone. Sounds like Fitzgerald is earning his reputation. He's lucky he's cute. What's your week look like? They fell into an easy text conversation, the kind that stretched on for hours without either of them noticing the time. Mia told him about a client meeting she had on Tuesday, and Daniel described the transmission job that was going to take up most of his Monday. They talked about nothing important and everything that mattered, the small details of daily life that people only shared when they wanted someone else to know them. When Daniel finally said goodnight, it was past midnight, and he had to be up in 6 hours for work. But he lay in bed feeling more awake than he had in years, his phone on the nightstand still showing their conversation, and thought about how strange it was that a blind date he'd almost skipped could turn into this, into possibility, into hope, into something that felt like it might actually last. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that surprised Daniel with how natural it felt. He and Mia texted throughout the day, good morning messages and lunch break check-ins and goodnight conversations that stretched longer than they should. They saw each other when they could, fitting dates around Daniel's work schedule and Carter's routine. Sometimes it was just coffee, 30 minutes stolen before Daniel had to pick up Carter from school. Sometimes it was dinner, the three of them trying new restaurants where Carter could order chicken fingers, and Mia would gamely try whatever unusual appetizer caught her eye. Mia came to Carter's soccer game on a Saturday morning, cheering from the sidelines like she'd been there all season. She brought homemade cookies to the garage one Tuesday afternoon, and Daniel's coworkers gave him knowing looks that he ignored while Mia charmed them all by asking intelligent questions about the classic cars they were restoring. She fit into his life so seamlessly that sometimes Daniel forgot they'd only known each other a month, then 6 weeks, then 2 months. She's good for you, Marcus said one Thursday evening when he'd stopped by the garage. You smile more. I smiled before. Not like this, not like someone who remembered what happy feels like. Daniel didn't argue because Marcus wasn't wrong. Something had shifted in him since that first dinner, like a door he'd locked had suddenly opened, letting light into rooms that had been dark too long. He was sleeping better, laughing easier, looking forward to days that used to just be things to get through. And Carter had adopted Mia with the wholehearted enthusiasm he brought to everything he loved. He drew her pictures of dinosaurs that she taped to her refrigerator. He asked when she was coming over like it was a given that she would. He'd started saying we when he talked about weekend plans, as in, we could go to the zoo, or we should get pizza, and the we always included Mia now. Is Mia your girlfriend? Carter asked one night during bedtime stories. Daniel set down the book they'd been reading. Would that be okay with you if she was? Yeah, she's awesome, and she doesn't baby talk me like some grown-ups. No, she definitely doesn't do that. So is she? Daniel thought about how to answer, about the conversations he and Mia had been having about what they were to each other, about taking things slow for Carter's sake, even though neither of them felt particularly slow about any of this. Yeah, he said finally. She is. Carter beamed. Cool. Can we tell her tomorrow? I think she probably already knows, buddy. But yeah, we can tell her. They did tell her the next day over lunch, and Mia's smile when Carter announced very seriously that she was officially Dad's girlfriend now was worth every moment of vulnerability it had taken to get here. She'd looked at Daniel over Carter's head, and he'd seen in her eyes what he felt in his chest. That this was real, that it mattered, that they were building something neither of them had expected, but both of them wanted. 3 months in, Mia had a key to Daniel's house. 4 months in, she'd helped Carter with his dinosaur diorama for the school science fair, the two of them spending an entire Saturday constructing a prehistoric landscape out of papier-mâché and toy figures. 5 months in, Daniel realized he was in love with her and didn't know how to say it without sounding like every romantic comedy he'd ever half-watched. He didn't have to. Mia said it first, one quiet Tuesday evening when Carter was at his grandparents' and they were cooking dinner together in Daniel's small kitchen. I love you, she said, so casually that Daniel almost missed it over the sound of pasta boiling. Just thought you should know. Daniel turned from the stove, the wooden spoon still in his hand, and looked at this woman who'd walked into his life when he wasn't looking for anyone and somehow become essential. I love you too, he said, and watched her smile go soft and bright at the same time. Good, she said, because I was starting to think I was the only one falling here. Not even close. She crossed the small kitchen and kissed him, and Daniel thought about all the times he'd almost said no to Marcus, almost stayed home that February night, almost let his fear of complication keep him from this, from her, from the way she made even ordinary Tuesday evenings feel like something worth celebrating. They were still learning each other, the big things and the small ones. Daniel learned that Mia sang off-key in the shower and was terrible at board games and always cried during nature documentaries. Mia learned that Daniel took his coffee black, that he talked to himself when he was working through a mechanical problem, that he still tucked Carter in every single night no matter how late he worked. They learned how to fight, rare but honest conversations where they both said what they meant and meant what they said. They learned how to make up, how to apologize, how to adjust when their needs didn't quite align. And through it all, Carter thrived. His grades stayed good, his smile came easy, and he started talking about the future in a way that included Mia as naturally as breathing. When I'm older and have my own garage like Dad, Mia can design the logo, or maybe Mia wants to come to Grandma's with us for Thanksgiving. He's getting attached, Daniel told her one night, voicing the fear that woke him up sometimes at 3 a.m. If this doesn't work out, Daniel... Mia took his face in her hands. I'm not going anywhere. You know that, right? People say that. I'm not people. I'm me. And I'm here because I want to be, because I love you, and I love Carter, and I love this life we're building. I'm not running. He believed her because he had to, because the alternative was living in fear of losing something good instead of enjoying it while he had it. So he let himself believe, let himself plan future dates, and imagine future holidays and think about what it might look like if this kept going, if Mia kept being part of their lives not just for months, but for years. 6 months in, everything was perfect. And Daniel, who'd learned the hard way that perfect never lasted, tried not to think about what might come next. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in late August. While Daniel was underneath a Honda Accord replacing brake pads and Mia was in her apartment tweaking color schemes for a restaurant rebrand. Daniel didn't hear his phone the first time it rang, or the second, but when Marcus stuck his head under the car and said, "Your phone's been going off for 5 minutes straight," something cold settled in Daniel's stomach. He rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands on his coveralls, and saw 7 missed calls from a number he didn't recognize. Before he could check the voicemail, his phone rang again. "Hello? Is this Daniel Wright?" The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. "Yeah, this is Daniel. Who's this?" "My name is Patricia Chen. I'm calling from Mercy Hospital in Cooperstown. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I have Mia Harper's phone here, and you're listed as her emergency contact." The garage disappeared. The sounds of pneumatic tools and classic rock on the radio and Marcus asking if everything was okay, all of it faded into a high-pitched ringing in Daniel's ears. What happened? His voice came out steady even though his hands had started shaking. Is she okay? She's stable. She was in a car accident about 2 hours ago on Route 28. A deer ran into the road and she swerved to avoid it. The car rolled, but she was wearing her seatbelt. She has some broken ribs, a concussion, and we're monitoring her for internal injuries, but the doctors expect her to make a full recovery. I'm in Syracuse. That's 3 hours away. Can I talk to her? She's sedated right now, but Mr. Wright, there's something else you should know. The accident happened because Mia was driving to Cooperstown. Her father had a stroke this morning. He's in ICU here at Mercy. Daniel sat down hard on the concrete floor of the garage, not caring about the grease or the oil stains or Marcus hovering with increasing concern. How bad? I can't give you details about another patient, but Mia was very worried when she got the call. That's probably why she was driving so fast when the deer appeared. Patricia's voice softened. She's going to need support when she wakes up. Her mother is here with her father, and her brother is flying in from Japan, but it'll be at least 24 hours before he arrives. Tell her I'm coming. Tell her when she wakes up that I'm on my way. I will. Drive safely, Mr. Wright. Daniel ended the call and looked up at Marcus, who was already pulling off his work shirt. What happened? Mia's father had a stroke. She was driving to Cooperstown and got in an accident. I have to go. I'll cover your shifts. Take as long as you need. I have to get Carter from school first, and I don't know what I'm going to do with him. My parents are in Florida until next week, and bring him to my place. Amy will watch him. You know she loves that kid. Marcus pulled Daniel to his feet. Go. We've got this. Daniel drove home on autopilot, his mind racing through logistics and worst-case scenarios. He threw clothes in a duffel bag, grabbed Carter's overnight things, and was pulling up to the elementary school 15 minutes before dismissal ended. He sat in the pickup line with his hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to figure out how to explain this to a 6-year-old who'd never seen Daniel panic about anything. When Carter climbed into the truck, his smile faded immediately. Dad? What's wrong? Buddy, we need to talk. Mia's dad got really sick today, and she got hurt trying to go see him. She's okay, he added quickly when Carter's eyes went wide. She's in the hospital and the doctors are taking good care of her, but I need to drive to where she is to make sure she's okay. You're going to stay with Uncle Marcus and Aunt Amy for a few days. Is Mia going to die? The question hit Daniel in the chest. No, buddy, she's not going to die. She broke some ribs and bumped her head, but she's going to be fine. You promise? I promise. But even as he said it, Daniel thought about Mia's father in ICU, about strokes and internal injuries and all the ways that stable wasn't the same as safe. He dropped Carter at Marcus's house with hugs that lasted too long and promises to call every day, and then he was on the highway heading east, watching the sun sink lower as Syracuse disappeared in his rearview mirror. He made the 3-hour drive in 2.5, his hands steady on the wheel, even though his mind wouldn't stop conjuring images of Mia's car rolling, of her alone and scared and hurt. He'd texted her phone even though he knew she wouldn't answer, just typing out, I'm coming, and I love you, and hold on, like the words could reach her through the sedation. Mercy Hospital was smaller than he'd expected, a 3-story building on the edge of Cooperstown that looked more like an old school than a modern medical facility. Daniel found visitor parking and jogged to the entrance, his work boots loud on the linoleum as he approached the information desk. I'm looking for Mia Harper. She was brought in this afternoon from a car accident. The woman at the desk typed something into her computer. 3rd floor, room 312, but visiting hours end at 9, and it's 8:45 now. I just drove 3 hours to get here. She looked at him, really looked, seeing whatever was written on his face, and her expression softened. 3rd floor, elevators are to your left. Daniel took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with exertion. The 3rd floor was quiet, just the beep of monitors and the soft voices of nurses at their station. He found room 312 and stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. Mia was asleep, her dark hair spread across the pillow and her face too pale against the white sheets. Bandages wrapped her head, and he could see the edge of more bandages beneath her hospital gown where her ribs were taped. An IV ran into her left hand, and monitors tracked her heartbeat and oxygen levels with steady electronic beeps. But she was breathing. She was whole. She was here. Daniel stepped into the room and sank into the chair beside her bed, reaching for her hand with a gentleness that surprised him. Her fingers were cool, and he wrapped both his hands around hers, trying to warm them. "Hey," he said softly. "It's me. I'm here. You're okay. Everything's going to be okay." She didn't wake, but her fingers twitched slightly in his grip, and Daniel held on tighter. He didn't know how long he sat there, long enough that the nurse came to check Mia's vitals and told him visiting hours were over, but when she saw his face, she just said, "I'll be back in an hour." Long enough that his back started to ache from the uncomfortable chair and his eyes burned with exhaustion. Long enough that the sky outside the window went from dusk to full dark. When Mia's eyes finally fluttered open, it was past midnight, and Daniel had been dozing with his head on the edge of her bed, still holding her hand. "Daniel?" Her voice was rough, barely above a whisper, but it jolted him awake like an electric shock. He sat up, his free hand going to her face, cupping her cheek with infinite care. "Hey, I'm here, you're okay. My dad—" Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could finish the sentence. "They called and said he had a stroke, and I was driving so fast, and there was a deer, and I don't remember anything after that." "Shh. It's okay. Your dad's here in the hospital. He's in ICU, but your mom's with him. The nurses said he's stable. I need to see him." Mia tried to sit up and gasped, her hand going to her ribs. "God, that hurts. You broke 3 ribs. You need to stay still." Daniel eased her back against the pillows. "The doctor said you have a concussion too. You're not going anywhere tonight." "But my dad—" "Your mom knows you're here. I'll talk to the nurses, see if we can get you down to see him tomorrow when you're stronger. Right now, you need to rest." Mia's tears kept coming, silent and steady, and Daniel wished desperately that he could fix this the way he fixed engines. Find the broken part, replace it, make everything work again. But there was no quick repair for grief and fear and pain, so he just held her hand and let her cry. "I'm so scared," she whispered. "What if he doesn't wake up? What if he dies and I never got to say goodbye?" "He's going to wake up. You're both going to be okay." "You can't know that." "No," Daniel admitted. "But I'm choosing to believe it anyway. And I'm not leaving, Mia. Whatever happens, I'm right here." She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw the moment she understood what he was saying. Not just about tonight, but about everything. About showing up when things got hard. About not running when life got complicated. "You drove all the way here," she said. "Of course I did. You're my person. Where else would I be?" Fresh tears tracked down her cheeks. "Carter is with Marcus and Amy. He's fine. He made me promise you weren't going to die." "What did you tell him?" "That you're tough, and you're going to be okay. Was I wrong?" The smallest smile touched her lips. "No, you weren't wrong." A nurse appeared in the doorway then, a different one from before, older and stern-looking. "Sir, visiting hours ended 3 hours ago." "I know. I'm sorry. You just got here, and your girlfriend just woke up, and you're not ready to leave." The nurse's expression softened just slightly. "I can give you 10 more minutes. Then you need to let her sleep, and you need to find somewhere to sleep yourself. There's a hotel 2 blocks away that gives hospital discounts." "Thank you." When the nurse left, Daniel turned back to Mia. "I should let you rest. Stay." Her grip on his hand tightened. "Just until I fall asleep again?" So he stayed, sitting in that uncomfortable chair and holding her hand while she drifted in and out of consciousness, each time waking just long enough to make sure he was still there. When the nurse returned, more insistent this time, Daniel kissed Mia's forehead and promised to be back first thing in the morning. The hotel was exactly where the nurse said it would be, a budget chain that had seen better decades. Daniel checked in, climbed the stairs to a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and old carpet, and collapsed on the bed without bothering to undress. He called Carter, keeping his voice steady while his son asked 100 questions about Mia and when she'd be better and whether Daniel would be home soon. He called Marcus to say thank you. He called his parents in Florida to let them know what was happening. And then he lay in the dark and let himself feel everything he'd been holding back since that phone call in the garage. The fear, the helplessness, the terrifying realization of how much he stood to lose. He loved her. He loved Mia Harper with an intensity that scared him sometimes. Loved the way she laughed and the way she listened and the way she'd seamlessly woven herself into the fabric of his and Carter's life. And now she was lying in a hospital bed with broken ribs and a concussion, and her father was fighting for his life 2 floors down, and Daniel couldn't fix any of it. All he could do was be here. So that's what he'd do. The next morning, Daniel was back at the hospital before 7, bringing coffee he'd grabbed from the lobby and wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Mia was awake when he walked in, looking more alert than she had the night before, but somehow more fragile too. "Any news about your dad?" he asked, setting the coffee on her bedside table. "Mom called an hour ago. He's awake. He can't talk yet, and the right side of his body isn't moving, but he's awake and he knows who she is." Mia's voice cracked. "I need to see him, Daniel. I don't care what the doctors say." "Let me talk to your nurse. We'll figure it out." And it took 2 hours of negotiation, a doctor's approval, and a wheelchair. But eventually Daniel was pushing Mia through the hospital corridors to the ICU on the 2nd floor. Her mother met them outside her father's room, a small woman with Mia's eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun that had started to come loose. "Mom." Mia reached up from the wheelchair, and her mother bent down to embrace her carefully, mindful of the broken ribs. "Oh, honey, when they called about the accident, I thought—" She didn't finish, just held her daughter and cried into her hair. "I'm okay. I'm okay, Mom. How's Dad?" "He's in there. He's been asking for you." "Well, not asking exactly, but he keeps looking at the door." Her mother straightened, seeming to notice Daniel for the first time. "You must be Daniel." "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry we're meeting like this. Mia's told us about you and your son." She studied him with the frank assessment of a mother evaluating the man her daughter loved. "Thank you for being here. There's nowhere else I'd be." Something in her expression eased, like he'd passed a test he hadn't known he was taking. "Come on, he'll want to see you both." Mia's father lay in a hospital bed surrounded by more machines than Daniel had seen outside a mechanic's diagnostic setup. Robert Harper was a big man, or had been before the stroke, broad-shouldered and tall, the kind of father who'd probably taught his daughter to change a tire and balance a checkbook and stand up for herself. Now he looked diminished, the right side of his face sagging and his right arm lying motionless on top of the blanket. But his eyes were alert, and when he saw Mia, they filled with tears. "Dad." Mia wheeled herself to his bedside, taking his left hand in both of hers. "I'm here. I'm okay. We're both going to be okay." Robert made a sound that might have been her name, though the stroke had stolen the shape of it. His left hand squeezed hers, and Daniel saw Mia's composure finally break completely. She laid her head on her father's chest, careful of all the wires and tubes, and cried while her father's good hand stroked her hair with shaking fingers. Daniel stood in the doorway with Mia's mother, giving them space for a grief he had no place in. But Mia's mother touched his arm gently. "She's going to need you," she said quietly. "This is going to be a long recovery, for both of them. I'm not going anywhere. Even if it takes months? Even if she has to stay here to help with his rehabilitation?" Daniel looked at Mia, at the woman he loved breaking apart beside her father's hospital bed, and knew with absolute certainty what his answer was. Even then. Over the next week, Daniel learned the rhythm of hospital life. He'd wake up at the budget hotel, grab coffee and whatever passed for breakfast in the lobby, and arrive at Mia's room by 7. She was moved out of the hospital and into a rehabilitation wing on the 4th day, her ribs healing and her concussion symptoms fading, but her father's condition keeping her tethered to Cooperstown. Robert Harper was improving slowly. He'd regained some movement in his right leg, could say a handful of words with effort, and was working with physical therapists twice a day to relearn the basic tasks the stroke had stolen. But the doctors were clear, recovery would take months, maybe a year, and someone would need to be there to help. "I have to stay," Mia told Daniel on the 6th night, sitting in the rehabilitation wing's common room while her mother took a break and her father slept. "Mom can't do this alone. She's not strong enough to help him transfer from the bed to the wheelchair, and the therapists say he'll need help with everything for a while. Getting dressed, bathing, eating, everything." "What about your brother?" "He's going back to Japan next week. He has a contract he can't break. And even if he could stay, he doesn't know the first thing about caregiving. Mia looked at her hands, twisting her fingers together. It has to be me. For how long? I don't know. 3 months? 6? However long it takes for Dad to get stable enough that Mom can manage, or for us to find home health care we can afford. She looked up at him, and Daniel saw the question she was too afraid to ask out loud. He crossed the room and sat beside her, taking her restless hands in his. Okay. Okay? You need to stay, so you stay. We'll figure out the rest. Daniel, I live 3 hours away from you. We'll never see each other. And Carter will understand, and we'll visit, or you'll visit, or we'll figure out video calls and weekend trips and whatever else we need to do to make this work. That's not fair to you. You didn't sign up for a long-distance relationship. I signed up for you, Mia. This is part of you, your family, your dad's recovery, all of it. I'm not walking away because things got complicated. She was crying again, but these tears were different from the ones she'd shed over her father's hospital bed. What if it's too hard? What if we can't make it work? Then we'll deal with that if it happens, but I'm not giving up on us before we even try. Daniel cupped her face in his hands, making her look at him. I love you. That doesn't change because you're in Cooperstown instead of Syracuse. It doesn't change because you need to be here for your dad. It just means we have to work harder, and I'm willing to do that. Are you? Yes. God, yes. I just don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me. I promise. He kissed her then, gentle and certain, trying to pour everything he felt into that moment of connection. When they pulled apart, Mia was smiling through her tears. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. And I don't deserve you. So I guess we're even. Daniel stayed 2 more days, helping Mia move into her childhood bedroom in her parents' house, a small ranch-style place on the edge of town with a ramp they'd hastily installed for Robert's wheelchair. He met the home health nurse who'd be coming 3 times a week, helped Mia's mother figure out the insurance paperwork, and installed grab bars in the bathroom while Mia directed him from a kitchen chair, still moving carefully because of her ribs. And then it was time to go home. Back to Syracuse, back to work, back to Carter, who'd been so patient but who needed his father. Back to a life that suddenly felt incomplete without Mia in it. They stood in her parents' driveway on a Sunday morning, the September sun warm on their faces and the knowledge of separation heavy between them. Call me when you get home, Mia said, her arms wrapped around his waist. I will, and I'll call you every night, okay? We'll do video chat so you can see Carter. I miss him already. He misses you too. He made me promise to bring you home soon. I wish I could. I know. Daniel kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I love you. We're going to be okay. I love you too. He drove away watching her in his rearview mirror, standing in front of her parents' house, getting smaller and smaller until the road curved and she disappeared. And Daniel told himself that distance was just distance, that love was stronger than geography, that they'd survived worse than 3 hours of highway between them. But 3 hours might as well have been 300 when you were used to someone being part of your everyday life. When you were used to good morning texts and lunch break calls and the quiet comfort of knowing they were close enough to touch. The first week was hard. The second was harder. Daniel threw himself into work, taking extra shifts to keep his mind occupied and to make up for the week he'd missed. Carter asked about Mia every day. When she was coming back, could they visit? Why couldn't she just come home now that she was feeling better? Daniel explained about Mia's father, about family obligations, about how sometimes the people we love need us to be patient. But I want her here, Carter said one night during their video call with Mia, his lower lip trembling in a way that meant tears were coming. I want to be there too, buddy, Mia said from the screen, her smile brave but not quite reaching her eyes. But my dad needs my help right now. You understand that, right? I guess. Tell you what, next weekend, how about you and your dad drive here to visit? We can go to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Would you like that? Carter perked up. Really? Really? I've been wanting to show your dad where I grew up anyway. So they visited, and it was wonderful and terrible at the same time. Wonderful because they were together, because Carter got to see Mia and hug her and tell her about everything he'd been doing. Terrible because the weekend ended and Daniel had to drive home again, leaving Mia behind in Cooperstown with her father's wheelchair and her mother's exhausted gratitude and the slow, grinding work of rehabilitation. They fell into a pattern. Daniel and Carter drove to Cooperstown every other weekend, sometimes staying at the budget hotel, sometimes camping out in Mia's old bedroom when her mother insisted. Mia came to Syracuse once, just for a Sunday, looking thinner and more tired than Daniel had ever seen her, but lighting up when Carter threw himself into her arms. "How's your dad doing?" Daniel asked that night after Carter was in bed, the two of them squeezed together on his couch like they were making up for lost time. "Better? He can walk with a walker now, and his speech is improving. But it's slow, Daniel. So slow. Some days it feels like we're not making any progress at all. But you are making progress." "I know. I miss you. I miss Carter. I miss our life." "We miss you too." She was quiet for a long moment, her head on his shoulder and her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. Being away from you, feeling like I'm choosing between my dad and my future." "You're not choosing. You're doing what needs to be done." "It doesn't feel that way. It feels like I'm letting everyone down. My dad needs more help than I can give him. My mom is exhausted. You and Carter are 3 hours away. My clients are getting frustrated because I'm always distracted. I can't do all of it, Daniel. Something has to give." He held her tighter, wishing he had answers that didn't involve sacrifice and compromise. "We'll figure it out, together." But as October bled into November and the leaves turned and fell, and the first cold snaps warned of winter coming, Daniel started to wonder if love was enough. If wanting something badly could make it work when logistics and distance and duty kept pulling them apart. They talked every day, but the conversations got shorter, more strained. Mia was tired from helping her father with exercises and managing his medications and dealing with insurance companies. Daniel was tired from single parenting and working overtime and trying to keep Carter's spirits up when the little boy asked why Mia couldn't just come home. The visits became harder too. Every goodbye felt heavier, every drive back to Syracuse more lonely. Daniel would watch Mia in his rearview mirror, standing in her parents' driveway waving, and wonder how long they could keep doing this before one of them broke. The breaking point came in early December, 3 months after the stroke, on a weekend when Daniel couldn't get away from work, and Mia couldn't come to Syracuse because her father had a setback with his physical therapy. They were supposed to video chat at 8 o'clock that Saturday night, after Carter went to bed, but when Daniel's phone rang at 7:30, he knew something was wrong before he even answered. "Hey," Mia's voice was thick, like she'd been crying for hours. "Can we talk now instead? I know it's early, but I need to talk to you." Daniel glanced at Carter, who was building an elaborate Lego city on the living room floor, and stepped into the kitchen. "Yeah, of course. What's wrong? Is it your dad?" "No, I mean, yes, he had a bad day, but that's not—" She took a shaky breath. "I can't do this anymore, Daniel." The words hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, his knuckles going white. "Can't do what?" "This. Us. The distance. I love you so much it hurts, but I can't be the person you need when I'm 3 hours away taking care of my father. And you can't be the person I need because you have Carter and your job and a whole life in Syracuse. We're making each other miserable, and I don't know how to fix it." "Mia, wait. Let's just talk about this. We can figure something out." "What is there to figure out? My dad still can't dress himself without help. The doctors say it'll be at least another 3 months before he's stable enough for my mom to manage alone, maybe longer. I can't leave, Daniel, and I can't ask you to uproot your entire life and move here. That's not fair to you or to Carter." Daniel's mind raced, searching for solutions, for compromises, for anything that would stop this conversation from going where it was clearly heading. "So what are you saying? You want to break up?" The silence on the other end lasted so long he thought the call had dropped. When Mia finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't want to, but I think we have to, before this gets even harder, before Carter gets more attached and I disappoint him the way I'm disappointing you." "You're not disappointing me. I missed his school play last week. I've canceled 3 visits in a row. When was the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about how tired we are or how hard this is?" She was crying now, not even trying to hide it. I love you, Daniel. I love Carter. But love isn't enough if I can't actually be there. If all I can give you is phone calls and broken promises and one weekend a month, if we're lucky. Daniel felt something crack inside his chest, right where his heart was supposed to be. So that's it? You're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. You deserve someone who can be there for you and Carter every day, not someone who's constantly choosing between her family and her relationship. And I deserve, her voice broke completely. I deserve to take care of my father without feeling guilty that I'm letting everyone else down. Mia, please, just give me a minute to think. There has to be another way. I've been thinking about this for weeks, Daniel. I've tried to figure out how to make it work, and I can't. Every solution requires someone to sacrifice something huge, and I can't ask you to do that. I won't. Daniel pressed his forehead against the cool kitchen cabinet, fighting against the tide of panic rising in his throat. What if I moved there? What if Carter and I came to Cooperstown? And what? You'd give up your job, pull Carter out of his school, away from his friends, away from Marcus and Amy? Move to a town where you don't know anyone and there's exactly one garage that might hire you if you're lucky? No, I won't let you do that. That should be my choice. And this is mine. Mia's voice steadied slightly, like she'd made up her mind and was forcing herself to see it through. I care about you too much to let you sacrifice everything for a relationship that might not even survive the resentment of what you gave up. This is the right thing to do, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. The right thing, Daniel repeated, the words tasting bitter. The right thing would be not giving up on us. I'm not giving up. I'm letting you go before I hurt you worse, before I hurt Carter worse. She took another shaky breath. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I wish things were different. I wish my dad hadn't gotten sick, or that I lived closer, or that I was stronger and could handle all of this better. But I'm not, and I can't, and I need you to understand that this is killing me too. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to demand that they keep trying, wanted to tell her she was wrong and scared and making a mistake. But beneath his own pain, he could hear the exhaustion in her voice, could recognize the sound of someone who'd been holding on so tight for so long that her hands were bleeding and she just couldn't grip anymore. Is this really what you want? He asked quietly. No, but it's what needs to happen. Okay, the word came out hollow. Okay, if that's what you need. Daniel, I should go. Carter's going to wonder where I am. Will you tell him I'm sorry, that I love him, and I'm so sorry? Yeah, I'll tell him. Daniel's hand was shaking as he gripped the phone. Take care of yourself, Mia. You too. He ended the call and stood in his kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling like someone had reached into his chest and pulled out everything that mattered. From the living room, he could hear Carter humming to himself as he played, completely unaware that his world was about to get smaller and sadder, and that there was nothing Daniel could do to prevent it. Eventually, Daniel forced himself to move. He walked back into the living room and sat down on the floor next to Carter's Lego city, watching his son's small hands place tiny plastic people in windows and on sidewalks. Dad, look, I made a whole downtown with shops and everything. That's great, buddy. Really great. Carter looked up, his smile fading when he saw Daniel's face. What's wrong? Daniel had promised himself he'd never lie to his son, even when the truth was hard. I just talked to Mia. She's having a really tough time helping her dad get better, and she thinks it's too hard for her to keep visiting us right now. But she's coming next weekend, right? She promised. I don't think she's going to be able to come for a while, Carter. Maybe not at all. Carter's lower lip started trembling. Why not? Doesn't she love us anymore? She does love us. She loves us very much. But sometimes love isn't enough when people live far apart and have different responsibilities. Mia needs to focus on her dad right now, and we need to respect that. But I miss her. I know, buddy. I miss her too. Carter threw himself into Daniel's arms, and they sat there on the living room floor surrounded by Legos, holding each other while Carter cried, and Daniel tried to figure out how to explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes the people you love leave not because they want to, but because they think they have to. The next few weeks were brutal. Daniel threw himself into work with a single-minded intensity that made Marcus pull him aside and ask if he was okay at least 3 times a week. Carter asked about Mia constantly at first. Could they visit her? Could they call her? When was she coming back? Until Daniel finally sat him down and explained as gently as he could that Mia wasn't coming back, that sometimes people's lives went in different directions even when they cared about each other. Daniel didn't talk to Mia after that night. She texted once, 2 days later, just saying, "I'm sorry, I hope you and Carter are okay." He stared at the message for 20 minutes before typing back, "We're fine. Hope your dad's doing better." It was a lie on both counts, but it was all he could manage. He deleted her number from his favorites, took down the photos of them that had been scattered around his house, packed away the coffee mug she'd left in his cabinet, and the sweater she'd forgotten on his couch. He didn't throw any of it away, couldn't bring himself to do that, but he put it all in a box in the back of his closet where he wouldn't have to see it every day. Carter stopped asking about Mia around Thanksgiving, which should have been a relief but somehow made everything worse. It meant his son was accepting it, moving on, learning the lesson that people you love sometimes disappear from your life, and you just have to get used to their absence. Christmas was particularly hard. The year before, they'd spent it with Mia, the three of them ice skating and drinking hot chocolate and decorating Carter's gingerbread house with enough candy to give a dentist nightmares. This year, it was just Daniel and Carter opening presents in their living room at 6 in the morning, then driving to Marcus and Amy's for dinner, and the whole day felt like it was missing something essential. "Do you think Mia got any presents?" Carter asked on Christmas night, his voice small in the darkness of his bedroom. Daniel, who'd been tucking him in, felt his chest constrict. "I'm sure she did, buddy. Her family loves her a lot. I miss her at Christmas." "Yeah, me too." January came in cold and gray, matching Daniel's mood perfectly. He worked, took care of Carter, went through the motions of his life with mechanical efficiency. He was functional, responsible, present for everything his son needed. But the lightness that Mia had brought into his world was gone, replaced by a heavy awareness that he'd let himself hope for something permanent and had been wrong. It was Marcus who finally called him on it, cornering him in the garage on a Wednesday afternoon when they were both supposed to be working on an oil change. "You need to talk to her," Marcus said without preamble. "I don't need to do anything. You've been miserable for 3 months, man. Carter's worried about you. Amy's worried about you. I'm worried about you." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're going through the motions and pretending everything's okay, but you're not okay, and everyone can see it." Daniel threw down the wrench he'd been holding, the clang of metal on concrete echoing through the garage. "What do you want me to say, Marcus? She broke up with me. She made her choice. I'm dealing with it." "Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just shutting down." "She said it was too hard. She said she couldn't be what I needed while taking care of her dad. What was I supposed to do? Beg her to stay? Force her to choose between her father and me?" Marcus leaned against the car they'd been working on. "Did she actually say she didn't love you?" "No, she said she did love me. But that love wasn't enough." "And you just accepted that?" "What else was I supposed to do? Fight for her, maybe? Tell her you'd wait however long it took? Offer to actually help instead of just making her feel guilty about the distance?" Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. "Look, I get it. She pushed you away, and that hurt. But did you even try to push back?" Daniel opened his mouth to argue and found he didn't have an answer. Because the truth was, he hadn't fought. When Mia said it was over, he'd just accepted it, told himself she knew what she needed, and let her go. He'd been so focused on respecting her decision that he'd never stopped to question whether it was the right one or whether she'd made it out of exhaustion and fear rather than actual conviction. "She's still in Cooperstown," Marcus continued. "Amy saw on social media that her dad's doing better. He's in outpatient therapy now, walking on his own, which means she could come back to Syracuse if she wanted to, but she hasn't. You know why? Why? Because you haven't asked her to. Because she probably thinks you've moved on, that you accepted the breakup and don't want her back. She sacrificed the relationship because she thought that's what was best for you and Carter, and you let her believe it." The words hit Daniel like ice water. "She broke up with me. She said she couldn't do it anymore. And you didn't even try to change her mind. You just said okay and hung up." Daniel replayed that phone call in his head, the one that had ended everything. Mia crying, exhausted, convinced she was failing everyone. And him, hurt and defensive, agreeing to let her go instead of telling her they could find a way through it together. He'd been so busy protecting himself from potential heartbreak that he'd guaranteed it instead. "I screwed up," he said quietly. "Yeah, you did, but the good news is it's not too late to fix it." Daniel looked at his best friend, at the man who'd pushed him to go on that blind date in the first place, who'd been pushing him toward happiness even when Daniel fought against it. "What do I do?" "You get in your truck and you drive to Cooperstown. You tell her everything you should have said 3 months ago, and you ask her if she still loves you, because I guarantee she does. And if she says no, if she really has moved on, then at least you tried. At least you fought for something that mattered instead of just letting it slip away." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "But she's not going to say no, man. I'd bet money on it." Daniel went home that night and lay awake until 3 in the morning, arguing with himself. Marcus was right. He hadn't fought for Mia, hadn't told her he was willing to wait or help or do whatever it took to make things work. He'd just accepted her decision and tried to move on, telling himself it was what she wanted when really it was just the easier path than risking more pain. But what if Marcus was wrong? What if Mia really had moved on, had spent the last 3 months building a life in Cooperstown that didn't include him? What if showing up on her doorstep was just going to reopen wounds that had finally started to heal? The thought of Carter kept him awake longest. His son had finally stopped asking about Mia, had stopped looking sad every time they drove past her favorite restaurant or saw someone walking a cat that reminded him of Fitzgerald. If Daniel went to Cooperstown and things didn't work out, Carter would have to go through losing Mia all over again. But if things did work out... Daniel got out of bed at 4 in the morning and pulled the box from the back of his closet. Mia's coffee mug, the one with the chipped handle that she'd insisted was perfect anyway. Her sweater, soft and gray and still smelling faintly of her perfume. The photo of the 3 of them at the zoo, Carter on Mia's shoulders and Daniel's arm around her waist, all of them laughing at something the sea lions were doing. He told himself he was packing these things away to help himself move on. But really, he'd been saving them, keeping them safe for a future he was too scared to fight for. By the time Carter woke up at 7, Daniel had made his decision. "Hey, buddy," he said when his son shuffled into the kitchen in dinosaur pajamas. "How do you feel about taking a road trip this weekend?" Carter's eyes went wide. "To where?" "Cooperstown, to see Mia." "Really? She wants to see us?" "I don't know yet, but I want to find out. Is that okay with you?" Carter threw himself at Daniel, wrapping his arms around his father's waist. "Yes. Can we go now?" "Not now, Saturday. I need to make sure Marcus can cover my shifts, and you have school tomorrow and Friday. But Saturday morning, first thing, we'll drive there. Deal?" "Deal!" Daniel called Marcus during his lunch break to ask for the time off, and his friend just laughed and said he'd been waiting for this call. He called his parents to tell them what he was planning, and his mother said it was about time and to call her as soon as he knew what was happening. He didn't call Mia, didn't want to give her advance warning or a chance to prepare herself or tell him not to come. This needed to happen face to face, with both of them honest and present, and willing to be vulnerable in a way they hadn't been 3 months ago. Friday night, Daniel barely slept. He kept running through what he wanted to say, practicing words that never sounded right, trying to figure out how to explain that he'd been wrong to let her go, that he should have fought harder, that he wanted another chance if she'd give him one. Saturday morning arrived cold and clear, the kind of late January day where the sun was bright but had no warmth to it. Daniel and Carter were on the road by 7, stopping for breakfast at a diner halfway to Cooperstown, where Carter ate pancakes and asked approximately 800 questions about what they were going to say to Mia. "I don't know yet, buddy. I'm kind of figuring it out as we go." "But what if she doesn't want to see us?" "Then we'll deal with that. But I think she does want to see us. I think she's been missing us as much as we've been missing her." "How do you know?" "I don't, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway." They pulled into Cooperstown just before noon, the small town looking exactly the way it had the last time Daniel had been here. He drove through the quiet streets to the Harper house, his heart pounding harder with every turn. Mia's car was in the driveway, which meant she was home, which meant this was really happening. Daniel parked on the street and looked at Carter. "You ready?" "I'm scared." Me too, buddy, but sometimes the things that scare us are the things most worth doing. They walked up the driveway together, Carter's small hand gripping Daniel's tightly. Daniel rang the doorbell and waited, listening to footsteps approaching from inside. The door opened, and there she was. Mia looked different, thinner, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was wearing leggings and an oversized sweater that Daniel recognized as her comfort clothes. When she saw them standing on her porch, her face went through a series of expressions too quick to track: shock, confusion, hope, fear. "Daniel? Carter? What are you doing here?" Carter didn't wait for Daniel to answer. He launched himself at Mia, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face in her sweater. "I missed you so much." Mia's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him back, one hand going to his hair in a gesture so familiar and natural it made Daniel's chest ache. "I missed you too, sweetheart. So much." "Then why didn't you come back?" Carter's voice was muffled against her sweater, but the pain in it was clear. "Because I thought—" Mia looked up at Daniel, her eyes swimming. "I thought it was better for everyone if I stayed away." "It wasn't," Daniel said quietly. "It wasn't better at all." Mia's mother appeared in the hallway behind her, took one look at the scene on the porch, and gently extracted Carter from Mia's arms. "Carter, honey, why don't you come inside? I just made cookies, and I bet you'd like to say hi to Mia's dad. He's been asking about you." Carter looked at Daniel for permission, and Daniel nodded. "Go ahead, buddy. I need to talk to Mia for a minute." When they were alone on the porch, the cold air biting and the moment stretching between them, Daniel finally found the words he'd been rehearsing for 3 days. "I made a mistake," he said. 3 months ago when you called and said you couldn't do this anymore. I should have fought for us. I should have told you we'd figure it out together, that I didn't care how hard it was or how long it took. I should have told you that love was enough, because it is, Mia. It is enough if we both choose to make it enough." Mia wrapped her arms around herself, tears streaming down her face. "Daniel, let me finish, please." He took a step closer. "You were exhausted and scared and trying to take care of everyone, and instead of helping you carry that weight, I just let you push me away. I told myself I was respecting your decision, but really I was just protecting myself from getting hurt worse, and that was wrong. You deserve better than that. You deserved someone who'd stand with you through the hard stuff, not someone who backed away the first time things got complicated." "I broke up with you," Mia said, her voice shaking. "I told you it was over. You were just doing what I asked. You were drowning, and you thought letting me go would help keep your head above water, but I should have jumped in with you instead of watching from the shore." Daniel reached for her hands, and when she didn't pull away, he held them carefully. "I love you, Mia. I never stopped loving you. And if you'll let me, I want to try again. The right way this time." "What does the right way look like?" "I don't know exactly, but I know it involves me being here for you, helping with your dad's recovery if you'll let me, making the drive every weekend if that's what it takes. It means Carter and I visit more, and you come to Syracuse when you can and we talk about the hard stuff instead of pretending everything's fine until it breaks." He squeezed her hands gently. "Your dad's doing better, right? Your mom said he's in outpatient therapy now?" Mia nodded. "He's walking without the walker most days. His speech is almost back to normal. The doctors think he'll be able to manage with just mom's help in another month or 2. So you could come back to Syracuse soon, if you wanted to." "I've been thinking about it. Actually, I was planning to call you next week and see if maybe we could talk." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've been so miserable without you, Daniel, both of you. I thought I was doing the right thing, letting you go, but it just felt like I'd ripped out part of my heart and left it in Syracuse. So let's stop being miserable. Let's stop trying to do this alone when we could be doing it together." "What about Carter? I hurt him. I left him." "He's resilient, and he never stopped loving you. That kid has been asking about you for 3 months straight." Mia laughed through her tears. "He has? Every single day. He misses his favorite dinosaur consultant." She pulled her hands free and wiped at her face. "I don't deserve another chance. I gave up on us. You were trying to survive. And now I'm asking you to do more than survive. I'm asking you to come home." Daniel took a deep breath. "Not right this second. Not until your dad really is stable and your mom's ready. But soon. Come back to Syracuse. Move in with us. Let's build the life we were supposed to have before everything got complicated." Mia stared at him, her expression shifting from disbelief to something that looked like hope. "You want me to move in with you?" "Eventually, yeah. When you're ready. When your dad's ready. When it makes sense." Daniel reached up to brush a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I'm not asking you to choose between your family and me anymore. I'm asking you to trust that we can have both, that there's room in your life for all of us." Mia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch like she'd been starving for it. When she opened them again, they were clearer, more focused. "I've been so scared. Scared that I ruined everything. Scared that you'd moved on and found someone who wasn't such a mess. Scared that Carter would hate me for leaving." "Carter could never hate you, and I haven't moved on. I've just been waiting, even though I didn't realize that's what I was doing." He smiled slightly. "Marcus told me I was an idiot for not fighting for you the first time. He was right. Marcus is annoyingly wise sometimes. Don't tell him that. His ego's already big enough." She laughed, and it was the sound Daniel had been missing for 3 months, bright and genuine and full of life. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out like she couldn't hold them back anymore. "I never stopped. Even when I thought letting you go was the right thing, I never stopped loving you. So don't let me go. Not again. Let's do this right." Mia threw her arms around his neck, and Daniel caught her, holding her tight against him while she cried into his shoulder. He could feel her shaking, could feel the relief and fear and hope all tangled together in the way she gripped him like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. "I'm so sorry," she whispered against his neck. "I'm so sorry I gave up. I'm sorry I hurt you and Carter. I'm sorry I was too scared to believe we could make it work. Stop apologizing. We both made mistakes. What matters is what we do now." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her face blotchy from crying but beautiful anyway. "What do we do now?" "Now? We go inside and have cookies with your parents and Carter. We spend the weekend together, and then we start figuring out how to make this work for real." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "One step at a time. No pressure, no impossible expectations. Just us, being honest about what we need and what we can give." "I can do that." Mia took a shaky breath. "I want to do that." "Good, because I drove 3 hours to get here, and I'm not leaving without you agreeing to give us another shot." "You always were stubborn. You love that about me. I really do." She kissed him then, standing on her parents' front porch in the cold January air, and Daniel felt everything that had been broken inside him start to knit back together. It wasn't perfect, wasn't magical, wasn't the kind of kiss that solved all their problems, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was a beginning. When they finally went inside, hand in hand, they found Carter sitting at the kitchen table with Mia's mother, surrounded by chocolate chip cookies and telling her an elaborate story about his latest dinosaur discovery. Mia's father was in his recliner in the living room, moving his right arm through the exercises his physical therapist had taught him, and he looked up when they walked in. "Daniel," Robert said, his speech still slightly slurred but understandable. "Good to see you." "You too, sir. You're looking stronger." "Getting there. Slow but steady." Robert's eyes moved to his daughter, to the way she was holding Daniel's hand, and something knowing crossed his face. "You two work things out?" Mia nodded, wiping at her eyes again. "Yeah, Dad, we did." "Good. Hated seeing you so miserable these last few months. Felt like it was my fault." "Dad, no. Let me finish." Robert set down the small weight he'd been lifting. "You gave up a lot to come help your mother and me. Your relationship, your life in Syracuse, your happiness. I see that. Your mother sees that. And we're grateful, sweetheart. More grateful than we can say. But we don't want you sacrificing your whole future for us. You're my father. Of course I'm going to help you. And we love you for it. But the doctors say I'm doing well enough now that your mother can handle things. We'll get a home health aide to come a few days a week, help with the heavy lifting. You don't need to stay in Cooperstown forever taking care of an old man who's too stubborn to use his walker." Mia's mother appeared in the doorway, Carter trailing behind her with a cookie in each hand. "He's right, honey. You've been wonderful, and I couldn't have gotten through this without you. But it's time for you to go home. Build your life. Be with the people who make you happy. Are you sure? I don't want to leave if you're not ready. We're ready, her mother said firmly. Your father's appointments are all scheduled, we've got the medication routine down, and my sister already offered to come stay for a few weeks to help with anything we need. You've done your part, Mia. More than your part. Mia looked between her parents, her eyes filling again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come visit often, her father said with a slight smile. Bring this one and his boy. Let us get to know them properly. Carter, who'd been watching this whole exchange with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean Mia's coming home with us? Everyone looked at him, and Mia crouched down to his level. Not today, sweetheart. I still have some things to wrap up here, and I need to make sure Grandpa and Grandma are really okay before I leave. But soon. Maybe in a few weeks. Promise? I promise. Cross my heart. Carter studied her face seriously, like he was weighing whether to trust her word. Then he threw his arms around her neck. Okay, but you have to promise you won't leave again, not like before. I won't, Carter. I made a mistake before, but I'm not going to make it again. Your dad and I are going to figure this out together, and that means I'm not going anywhere. Daniel watched his son hug the woman he loved, watched her parents smile at each other with relief and approval, and felt the weight of the last 3 months finally start to lift. This wasn't going to be easy. There would still be logistics to work out, still hard conversations to have, still moments when the distance and the complications threatened to overwhelm them. But they were going to face it together now, and that made all the difference. They spent the rest of Saturday and most of Sunday in Cooperstown. Daniel and Carter stayed at the budget hotel Bombin, but they spent every waking hour at the Harper House. They had dinner Saturday night with Mia's parents, and Daniel watched Mia help her father cut his food and saw the easy affection between them, the way she anticipated his needs without making him feel helpless. Sunday morning, Mia took them to her favorite breakfast spot, a tiny diner where everyone seemed to know her name, and the waitress brought Carter extra whipped cream for his pancakes without being asked. They talked about the future in careful, hopeful terms. Mia would stay in Cooperstown for another month, making sure her father was truly stable and that her mother had all the support systems in place. She'd start looking for apartments in Syracuse, maybe something close to Daniel's house so Carter could visit easily. They'd take it slow, rebuild the trust that had fractured, learn how to communicate better when things got hard. What about your work? Daniel asked over coffee while Carter was in the bathroom. Can you do your design work from anywhere? That's the beauty of freelancing. As long as I have my laptop and internet, I'm good. I might lose a few local clients here, but I've been wanting to expand anyway. Maybe take on some bigger projects, build my portfolio. She reached across the table to take his hand. I've actually been in touch with a bookstore owner in Syracuse. Remember that logo I was working on? She loved it so much she referred me to 2 other businesses. I already have work waiting for me when I get back. You've been planning this. For the last month, yeah. I kept telling myself I was just preparing in case things changed, but really, I was hoping they would. Hoping you'd forgive me. Hoping we'd get another chance. I never needed to forgive you. I just needed to understand that we both got scared and made decisions from that fear instead of from love. When did you get so wise? Marcus has been coaching me. And my mother. And basically everyone who had to watch me be miserable for 3 months. Mia smiled, but it faded quickly. What about Carter's mother? Have you heard from her at all? It was a question she'd never asked before, had always been too cautious about overstepping. But now, with the promise of a real future between them, Daniel understood she needed to know where things stood. She sent a birthday card in October like she does every year. That's it. She signed away her parental rights when we divorced, and she's never expressed any interest in changing that arrangement. He met Mia's eyes directly. Carter knows who she is. I've shown him pictures, told him the basic story in age-appropriate terms. But she's not part of his life, Mia. She chose not to be. So if you're worried about her suddenly appearing and complicating things, I'm not worried about that. I just wanted to understand the full picture. What Carter knows, what he feels about it, how you want me to navigate that with him. Navigate it honestly. If he asks questions, answer them. If he wants to talk about her, listen. If he starts calling you mom someday because that's who you are to him, I won't stop him. But that's a long way down the road, and there's no pressure for any of it. Okay. Mia squeezed his hand. Thank you for trusting me with him. You've earned that trust. You earned it the first time you met him and treated him like a person instead of just some kid. You've been earning it every day since. When they finally had to leave Sunday afternoon, the goodbye was different from all the ones that had come before. This time there was no finality to it, no crushing weight of separation. Mia stood in her parents' driveway waving as Daniel and Carter pulled away. But her smile was real, and Daniel's promise to call that night felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. The drive back to Syracuse felt shorter than the drive there had been. Carter fell asleep in the back seat halfway home, worn out from excitement and too many cookies, and Daniel drove through the winter twilight thinking about second chances and the kind of love that survived distance and doubt and fear. Over the next month, they fell back into a rhythm that felt both familiar and entirely new. Daniel and Carter drove to Cooperstown twice more, shorter visits to check in and help Mia pack up her things. Mia came to Syracuse for a long weekend and stayed in Daniel's guest room, the three of them navigating the space between what they'd been and what they were becoming. Carter bloomed under the attention, his initial wariness fading as he realized Mia really wasn't leaving again. He showed her his school projects, taught her the new dinosaur facts he'd learned, and asked her opinion on everything from which shoes he should wear to whether dragons could theoretically evolve if given enough time and the right environmental pressures. "He's testing her," Marcus observed one night when Daniel stopped by for a beer after putting Carter to bed. "Seeing if she'll stick around this time." "I know. And she's passing every test. You still scared?" Daniel considered the question honestly. "A little, but not of losing her. More like I'm scared of screwing this up somehow, of saying the wrong thing or pushing too hard or not pushing hard enough. That's just called being in a relationship, man. The good ones are always a little scary because they matter so much. You lose something that doesn't matter, who cares? But lose something that's become essential to your happiness? That's terrifying. When did you become a philosopher?" "Amy's been making me watch romantic comedies. I'm learning things." Marcus took a sip of his beer. "But seriously, you and Mia are going to be fine. You both know what it's like to lose each other now. That knowledge, that fear of going through that again, it'll keep you honest, keep you fighting for each other instead of against each other." He was right. The month apart had changed something fundamental in how Daniel and Mia approached their relationship. They talked about the hard stuff now instead of letting it fester. When Mia worried she was being too dependent on Daniel, she told him instead of pulling away. When Daniel felt overwhelmed by work and single parenting and trying to maintain a long-distance relationship, he said so instead of pretending everything was fine. They had their first real argument on a Tuesday night in late February, something stupid about Daniel forgetting to call when he said he would because he'd gotten caught up in a transmission rebuild that ran 3 hours over. Mia called him out on it, Daniel got defensive, and for a few tense minutes it felt like they might be heading toward another breakup. But then Mia stopped mid-sentence and said, "Wait, we're doing this wrong. I don't want to fight about who's right. I want to talk about why I got so upset when you didn't call." And just like that, the fight transformed into a conversation. Mia explained that broken promises, even small ones, triggered her fear that Daniel would pull away again. Daniel explained that he'd been so focused on finishing the job that he'd lost track of time, but that didn't mean she wasn't important to him. They apologized, they adjusted their expectations, and they hung up feeling closer instead of further apart. "That," Mia said before they ended the call, "is how we should have handled things the first time, actually talking instead of making assumptions." "We're learning," Daniel said. "Better late than never." The apartment Mia found was a one-bedroom in a complex 10 minutes from Daniel's house, close enough that Carter could bike there when he got older, but far enough that they'd have their own spaces while they figured out what living in the same city again looked like. She moved in on the first Saturday of March, and Daniel and Marcus spent the day hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs while Mia directed and Carter helped by unpacking the kitchen boxes in a way that made absolutely no organizational sense. "Why is the blender in the bathroom?" Mia asked, finding Carter very seriously arranging small appliances on her bathroom counter. "Because it was in this box, and the box was labeled bathroom." Carter pointed to the label that clearly said kitchen, small appliances, but had been placed on the wrong box somewhere along the way. "See? Bathroom." Mia caught Daniel's eye, and they both started laughing, The kind of laughter that came from exhaustion and happiness and the sheer absurdity of trying to move someone's entire life in a single day. "You know what?" Mia said, still giggling. "The blender can live in the bathroom. Why not? I've always wanted to make smoothies while I brush my teeth." Carter beamed. "Really?" "No, buddy, not really. But I appreciate your creative reorganization skills." By the time the sun set, Mia's apartment was a disaster of half-unpacked boxes and furniture that hadn't found its final home yet. But it was hers. They ordered pizza and ate it sitting on her living room floor because her table wasn't assembled yet, and Daniel looked at Mia surrounded by the chaos of her new beginning and felt something settle deep in his chest. She was here. She was really, finally here. "What?" Mia asked, catching him staring. "Nothing, just glad you're home." "Me too." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "It feels right being back. I didn't realize how much I missed Syracuse until I was driving into town this morning. The traffic, the noise, even the gray sky. All of it felt like coming home." "That's because it is home. We're your home." Carter, who'd been dozing against a stack of boxes, perked up. "Does this mean we can see Mia whenever we want now?" "Pretty much, yeah." "Good, because I need help with my book report, and Mia's really good at helping me organize my thoughts." Mia laughed. "Is that the only reason you wanted me back? For book report help?" "No, I also missed your macaroni and cheese. Dad's is okay, but yours is better." "Wow, throwing me under the bus in front of my girlfriend. That's cold, buddy." "It's true, though," Carter said seriously. "Mia puts extra cheese on top." The domesticity of it, the easy banner and shared pizza and talk of macaroni and cheese recipes felt more important than any grand romantic gesture could have been. This was the life they were building together. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and warm and full of the kind of love that showed up for book reports and moving days and all the ordinary moments in between. Over the next few weeks, Mia settled into Syracuse like she'd never left. She reconnected with old clients and found new ones, her freelance business growing steadily as word spread about her design work. She joined Daniel and Carter for dinner most nights, sometimes cooking at her apartment and having them over, sometimes showing up at Daniel's with ingredients and taking over his kitchen while he and Carter set the table and talked about their days. She went to Carter's soccer games and cheered louder than any of the other parents. She met Daniel for lunch on his break, bringing sandwiches from the deli near her apartment and sitting with him in the garage break room while Marcus made exaggerated kissy faces behind her back. She was there for the ordinary stuff and the important stuff, and the line between them blurred until everything felt important just because they were doing it together. "So when are you going to ask her to move in for real?" Marcus asked one afternoon in early April, nearly 2 months after Mia's return to Syracuse. "We've talked about it. She wants to keep her apartment for now, have her own space while we make sure this is really working." "And is it really working?" Daniel thought about the way Mia had fallen asleep on his couch the night before, exhausted from a deadline, and how he'd covered her with a blanket and left her there because waking her up to drive home seemed cruel. He thought about how Carter had started saying, "when Mia gets here," instead of "if Mia comes over," the certainty in his voice that she would show up because she always did now. He thought about the toothbrush Mia kept in his bathroom and the way his house felt emptier on the night she wasn't there. "Yeah," he said, "it's really working." "Then maybe it's time to stop keeping her apartment just in case things don't work out and start trusting that they will. It's only been 2 months since she moved back. And you've known her for over a year. You've already done the breaking up and getting back together thing. At some point, you've got to stop being so cautious and just commit." Daniel knew Marcus was right, but the fear was still there, small and persistent. What if moving in together too fast put pressure on the relationship they'd worked so hard to rebuild? What if Mia wasn't ready? What if Carter struggled with the change? But that night, watching Mia read Carter a bedtime story with voices for all the different dinosaurs, he decided that fear was just fear. It didn't mean anything except that he cared enough to be scared of losing this. And living in fear wasn't living at all. After Carter was asleep and Mia was gathering her things to head back to her apartment, Daniel caught her hand. "Stay," he said simply. "I was planning to. It's late and I'm too tired to drive. I'll just crash on your couch like last night." "No, I mean stay. Move in. For real." The words came out in a rush before he could second-guess them. Your lease is up in 2 months anyway, and you're here almost every night. And Carter asks when you're coming home like this is already your home, and I want it to be. I want you here. Not visiting, not sleeping on the couch, but actually living here with us. Mia stared at him, her bag still slung over her shoulder, her keys in her hand. Are you serious? Completely. We can turn the office into your workspace, and you can reorganize the kitchen however you want because you're right that my pot and pan situation makes no sense. Carter's been asking when you're going to officially move in for weeks. I've just been too scared to ask. Scared of what? Scared that you'd say no. Scared that you'd say yes, but not really mean it. Scared that I'd mess this up somehow. He pulled her closer, his hands settling on her waist. But I'm more scared of wasting time being cautious when we could be building something real. So I'm asking, will you move in with us? Mia set down her bag and her keys very carefully, like she needed to make sure they were safe before she answered. When she looked up at him, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll move in with you. I'll reorganize your kitchen and set up my workspace in the office and be here every night when Carter goes to bed. I'll be part of this family for real, not just a visitor who sleeps on the couch. Daniel kissed her, deep and sure, and when they broke apart, they were both smiling. Carter's going to lose his mind when we tell him, Mia said. In a good way? The best way. He's been leaving my things in specific places around the house, like he's trying to make sure I have reasons to come back. My favorite mug in the cabinet, my sweater on the coat rack, that book I was reading on the coffee table. He's been building me a home here without even realizing it. Smart kid. He gets it from his dad. They told Carter the next morning over breakfast, and his reaction was exactly what they'd hoped for. He whooped so loud the neighbors probably heard, then immediately started planning which room would be Mia's office and whether they could get a cat like Fitzgerald, and if this meant Mia would be there for every breakfast from now on. Most breakfasts, Mia corrected gently. Sometimes I'll have early client meetings, or your dad will have to leave for work before I'm awake. But yes, buddy, I'll be here. This will be my home too. Our home, Carter said firmly. All of us together. Our home, Mia agreed, and caught Daniel's eye over their son's head with a smile that said she understood exactly how big this moment was. Moving Mia's things from her apartment to Daniel's house happened gradually over the next 2 months. Unlike the chaotic single-day move into her apartment, this was a slow integration of her life into theirs. Her clothes appeared in Daniel's closet, a few pieces at a time. Her design equipment took over the office with its big window and good natural light. Her books filled the empty spaces on Daniel's shelves, and her art went up on walls that had been bare for years. Carter helped with everything, treating each box like a treasure chest full of Mia's secrets. He insisted on being the one to arrange her desk supplies, to hang her favorite painting in the living room, to make sure her coffee mugs had a special place in the cabinet where she could reach them easily. I want her to know this is her house too, he explained very seriously when Daniel asked why he was being so particular about where everything went. Not just our house that she lives in, her house. That's very thoughtful of you, buddy. She was sad before. When she had to leave to help her grandpa, I don't want her to be sad again. Daniel pulled his son into a hug. She's not sad anymore, and she's not leaving. You know that, right? I know. But I want to make sure. So they made sure, the two of them, that every corner of their house had space for Mia, that she knew without question that she belonged there, that they wanted her there, that this was permanent in a way nothing else had been. The night Mia officially moved in, when her apartment was empty and her keys turned in to the landlord and all her belongings had found homes in Daniel's house, they celebrated with Carter's favorite dinner and a cake that said "Welcome Home" in blue frosting. This is the best day ever, Carter announced around a mouthful of cake. Even better than my birthday. Even better than Christmas? Mia teased. Way better, because now you live here forever and ever. Forever and ever, Mia repeated softly, looking at Daniel with an expression that said she understood the weight of that promise and was ready to keep it. That night, after Carter was asleep and the kitchen was clean and the house had settled into quiet, Daniel and Mia sat on the back porch in the warm June air. Fireflies blinked in the yard, and somewhere down the street someone was playing music, and everything felt exactly the way it was supposed to feel. I was thinking, Mia said, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder, about that blind date Marcus set up, how you almost didn't come. Best decision I almost didn't make, Daniel said. What if you hadn't? What if you'd stayed home that night? Then I would have missed out on the best thing that ever happened to me. He kissed the top of her head. But I didn't stay home. I showed up even though I was terrified. And you showed up, even though you could have said no to Marcus too. And we kept showing up for each other, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. We did, didn't we? We kept showing up, Daniel agreed. And I think that's what love really is. Not the grand gestures or the perfect moments, but just consistently showing up for each other even when it's inconvenient or scary or hard. Mia lifted her head to look at him, and in the dim porch light her eyes were serious. I want to keep showing up for you and Carter for the rest of my life. I know we haven't talked about marriage or anything official, but I need you to know that's where my head is. That's where my heart is. Daniel's pulse kicked up. They'd been careful not to rush things, to let the relationship rebuild at its own pace without forcing milestones or making promises they weren't ready to keep. But hearing Mia say it out loud, hearing her claim a future that stretched years and decades ahead, made something fierce and protective rise in his chest. Good, he said, because I've been carrying around a ring for 2 months waiting for the right moment to ask you. Mia sat up straight, her mouth falling open. You what? I bought it in April, the weekend after you agreed to move in. I saw it in a jewelry store window when I was running errands, and I just knew. He pulled her closer, his arms around her waist. I haven't asked yet because I wanted to make sure the timing was right, that we were both ready, that Carter was comfortable with the idea. But if you're telling me you're already there, that you already know what you want, I'm there. I'm so there, Daniel. I have been for months. I just didn't want to pressure you or make you feel like I was pushing for more than you were ready to give. Daniel laughed, the sound full of relief and joy and a little bit of disbelief that they'd both been holding back for the exact same reason. So we've both been waiting for the other person to be ready when we were already on the same page? Apparently. We're kind of terrible at this communication thing sometimes. Then let me be clear right now. Daniel stood up, pulling Mia to her feet, and then dropped to one knee right there on the back porch, with the fireflies blinking and the distant music playing and the June night warm around them. Mia Harper, I love you. I love the way you listen to Carter's dinosaur facts, like they're the most important things in the world. I love how you reorganized my entire kitchen and somehow made it make sense. I love that you sing off-key in the shower and cry at nature documentaries and always order the most unusual thing on any menu just to see if it's good. Mia was crying already, her hands covering her mouth, and Daniel kept going. I love that you came back even after I let you go. I love that you forgave me for not fighting hard enough the first time. I love that you show up every single day, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when it would be easier to walk away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small velvet box he'd been carrying with him everywhere for 2 months, just in case the moment presented itself. I want to spend the rest of my life showing up for you the way you show up for us. Will you marry me? He opened the box, revealing a simple white gold band with a single diamond that caught the porch light and threw tiny rainbows across Mia's tear-stained face. It wasn't extravagant or flashy, but it was beautiful in its simplicity, and from the way Mia gasped, he knew he'd chosen right. Yes, she said, the word coming out choked with emotion. Yes, of course, yes. 1,000 times yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made specifically for her hand. When he stood up, Mia threw herself into his arms, kissing him with a joy so pure and bright it made everything they'd been through worth it. The separation, the fear, the pain of those months apart, all of it had led them here, to this moment, to this promise. We should tell Carter in the morning, Mia said when they finally broke apart, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. He's going to be so excited. He's been asking when I was going to make you officially part of the family. He might actually explode from happiness. Can we tell my parents too, and your parents, and Marcus and Amy? We can tell everyone. We can shout it from the rooftops if you want. Mia looked down at her hand, at the ring that caught the light with every movement. I can't believe this is real. 6 months ago, I thought I'd ruined everything, and now you're stuck with us forever. Best thing I've ever been stuck with. They stayed up late into the night, sitting on the porch and talking about the future in concrete terms now that it was official. A wedding sometime next year, probably in the fall when the leaves were changing and the weather was perfect. Something small and intimate, just family and close friends. Maybe in Cooperstown so Mia's father could walk her down the aisle, or maybe in Syracuse in the park where they'd taken Carter on their second date. They'd figure out the details later. What mattered was the commitment, the choice to build a life together intentionally and permanently. When they finally went to bed, Daniel lay awake for a long time with Mia asleep beside him, her left hand resting on his chest and the ring pressing cool against his skin. He thought about the blind date he'd almost skipped, about the woman who'd walked into his life when he wasn't looking for anyone, about the family they'd built through patience and mistakes, and the willingness to keep trying even when it was hard. He thought about Carter asleep down the hall, about the little boy who'd been so cautious about letting people close, but who'd opened his heart to Mia completely. About how tomorrow morning they'd tell him that Mia was going to be his family forever, and how his face would light up with a joy that made everything worth it. Daniel fell asleep thinking about second chances and the kind of love that survived distance and doubt, and when he woke up the next morning to Carter jumping on the bed demanding pancakes, Mia was still there beside him, her ring catching the early sunlight streaming through the window. "Dad, Mia, wake up! It's Saturday and you promised pancakes!" Carter bounced between them, all elbows and knees and 7-year-old energy. "Buddy, we need to tell you something," Daniel said, catching his son mid-bounce. "Something important." Carter's eyes went wide. "What? Is everything okay?" "Everything's perfect." Daniel looked at Mia, who was sitting up now, her hair a mess and her smile brilliant even in the early morning light. "Mia and I are getting married." For a moment, Carter just stared at them, his face going through a series of expressions too quick to track. Then he screamed, a sound of pure joy that probably woke up the neighbors, and launched himself at Mia. "Really? You're really going to marry Dad? You're going to be my family forever?" "Really and truly," Mia said, hugging him tight. "If that's okay with you." "Okay? It's the best thing ever! Can I be in the wedding? Can I help plan it? Can we get a dog to celebrate?" "Yes to the first two. We'll talk about the dog," Daniel said, laughing at his son's enthusiasm. "Can I call you Mom?" The question came out quieter, more tentative, and Mia's eyes filled with tears. "You can call me whatever feels right to you, sweetheart. Mia, Mom, whatever you're comfortable with. There's no pressure either way." Carter considered this seriously. "I think Mom, because that's what you are. Not the lady who had me, but the one who's here. The one who makes me macaroni and cheese and helps with my homework and comes to my soccer games. That's what a mom is, right?" "Yeah, buddy," Daniel said, his own voice rough with emotion. "That's exactly what a mom is." Mia pulled Carter closer, and Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, and for a long moment they just held each other, while Carter talked a mile a minute about wedding plans, and whether he could invite his whole class, and if the dinosaur cake he'd seen on TV would be appropriate for a wedding. They spent the morning making phone calls. Daniel's parents cried happy tears over video chat and immediately started making plans to fly up for a visit. Mia's mother answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting for this call, and her father's slurred but joyful "about time" made Mia laugh through her tears. Marcus claimed credit for the entire relationship and demanded to be best man, which Daniel had already planned to ask him anyway. By noon, everyone who mattered knew, and the flood of congratulations and well wishes made Daniel's phone buzz constantly. But the best moment was when they drove to Mia's apartment to pick up the last few boxes she'd left there, and the landlord who'd rented to her congratulated them. "I could tell you'd be back together," the older woman said. "The way you talked about him when you moved in, even though you were trying not to. That kind of love doesn't just disappear." "No," Mia agreed, looking at Daniel with an expression that made his heart skip. "It really doesn't." The summer passed in a blur of happiness and planning. They set the wedding date for October 15th, giving them 4 months to organize everything. Carter appointed himself official wedding consultant and took the job very seriously, offering opinions on everything from flowers to music to whether the ceremony should include a moment of silence for all the dinosaurs that had gone extinct. "Buddy, I love you, but we're not having a dinosaur memorial at our wedding," Daniel said one night while they were looking at venue options. "But it would be educational." "It would also be weird," Mia said gently. "How about instead we make sure there are some dinosaurs on the cake, just small ones, as decoration?" Carter considered this compromise. "Okay, but they have to be scientifically accurate dinosaurs, not the movie kind with the wrong proportions." "Scientifically accurate dinosaurs on the cake. Got it." They chose a small inn in Cooperstown for the venue, a historic place with gardens overlooking the lake where Mia's father could navigate easily with his walker. The ceremony would be outdoors if the weather cooperated, intimate and simple with just 40 guests. Mia's brother was flying in from Japan to walk her down the aisle alongside their father, and Carter had already informed them he'd be carrying the rings because he was very responsible and wouldn't lose them or anything. Mia's design business was thriving, her client list growing as word spread about her work. She'd converted Daniel's office into a beautiful workspace with plants and good lighting and a door she could close when she needed to focus. Most days she worked from home, taking breaks to have lunch with Daniel when he could get away from the garage, picking up Carter from school, being present for the ordinary moments that made a family. Daniel had never been happier. Coming home to a house that was full of life and laughter, and Mia's off-key singing, having dinner together every night as a family, watching Carter flourish under the attention of two parents who adored him. It was everything he'd wanted but had been too afraid to believe he could have. "You know what I realized?" Mia said one August evening while they were cleaning up after dinner and Carter was in the living room doing homework. "I've never asked you about your dreams, your goals beyond the garage and being a dad. What do you want for yourself?" Daniel handed her a plate to dry, considering the question. "I've never thought about it much. The garage pays the bills, Carter's happy and healthy, I've got you. What else is there?" "But if you could do anything, what would it be?" He thought about it while they finished the dishes, about the classic cars he worked on sometimes that made him feel like an artist instead of just a mechanic, about the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it beautiful again. "I've always wanted to restore classic cars full-time," he admitted. "Not just fix them, but really restore them. Take something that's been sitting in someone's barn for 30 years and bring it back to life. But that's more hobby than career. It doesn't make financial sense." "What if it did? What if you started your own restoration shop on the side, built it up slowly until it could be your main thing? That would take years, and a lot of money I don't have. So we save, we plan, we make it happen." Mia set down the dish towel and turned to face him. "Daniel, you've spent so long making sure everyone else's dreams come true. Carter's, mine, even your clients at the garage. When do you get to chase what you want?" "I have what I want. You, Carter, a stable job, and you could have all of that plus work that actually fulfills you. I make good money now. Between both our incomes, we could start putting away funds for your restoration shop. Maybe in a few years, you could cut back your hours at the garage and start taking on private restoration projects. Build a client base, a reputation." Daniel stared at her, this woman who'd walked into his life and somehow made him believe in possibilities he'd stopped considering years ago. "You'd really do that? Support us while I built something that might not even succeed?" "Partners support each other's dreams. That's the whole point." She took his hands, her engagement ring catching the kitchen light. "You believed in me when I wanted to go freelance full-time. You supported me through my dad's recovery. You drove 3 hours to fight for us when I'd given up. Let me do this for you. Let me help you build something that makes you happy. I love you so much. I love you too. Now stop arguing and start thinking about what your dream restoration shop would look like." So they started planning that too, adding it to the list of future projects alongside the wedding, and maybe getting a dog, and eventually adding on to the house so Carter could have a bigger bedroom. They made spreadsheets and savings goals, researched business licenses and insurance requirements, looked at properties that might work for a small restoration shop someday. It was Marcus who found the perfect space, an old warehouse on the edge of town that was being sold for a price Daniel could almost afford if he saved aggressively for 2 years. "You could run the restoration shop in the front and live in the back if you converted it," Marcus said, showing him the listing. "Or keep living in your house and just use this as the workspace. It's too soon, Daniel said, but he couldn't stop looking at the photos, imagining his tools on those walls, classic cars in various states of restoration filling the space. So you work toward it. You make it a 5-year plan instead of a someday, maybe plan. You've got time, man, and you've got people who believe in you. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color in the trees. The wedding was 6 weeks away, and Mia was in full planning mode, checking and rechecking every detail to make sure everything was perfect. Carter had his suit picked out, a miniature version of what Daniel would wear, and he practiced walking down the aisle with a pillow every night after dinner until Daniel had to gently suggest maybe they could take a break from wedding rehearsals. But what if I mess it up? What if I drop the rings or trip or forget what I'm supposed to do? Then we'll laugh about it and pick up the rings and keep going, Mia said, pulling him onto her lap. The wedding isn't about everything being perfect, sweetheart. It's about your dad and me promising to love each other and you forever. Even if things go a little wrong, that promise is still the same. You promise you're not going to change your mind? You're definitely going to marry Dad and be my mom forever? The question came out of nowhere, and Mia's eyes met Daniel's over Carter's head. They'd both noticed that as the wedding got closer, Carter had gotten more anxious, asking variations of the same question about whether Mia was really staying. I promise, Mia said firmly. I'm not going anywhere, Carter. Not now. Not after the wedding, not ever. You're stuck with me. Good. Because I don't want anyone else. Me either, buddy. The Thursday before the wedding, Mia's parents drove down from Cooperstown to stay for a few days and help with final preparations. Robert Harper was moving much better now, his speech almost entirely back to normal, and when he hugged Daniel, he held on tight. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving up on her. For driving all that way when she thought it was over. She told us what you did, and I want you to know I'm grateful. I love her, sir. There was never a question of giving up. You're a good man. I'm proud to call you my son-in-law. The words hit Daniel harder than he expected, this acceptance and approval from a man whose life he'd barely been part of. His own father had passed years ago, and having Robert claim him as family meant more than he knew how to express. Friday night, they had the rehearsal dinner at a small Italian restaurant, the same one where Daniel and Mia had their first date. Sitting in a booth with Mia on one side and Carter on the other, surrounded by family and friends who'd supported them through everything, Daniel felt a peace he'd never quite experienced before. This was what he'd been searching for without knowing it. Not perfection, but belonging. Not a life without challenges, but people who'd face those challenges with him. Marcus stood up to give a toast, his glass raised and his smile wide. I want to take credit for all of this. If I hadn't set them up on that blind date, Daniel would still be alone and miserable, and Mia would still be stuck in Cooperstown without realizing there was a mechanic in Syracuse who needed her. Hear, hear, someone called out, and everyone laughed. But seriously, Marcus continued, I've watched these two fall apart and come back together, and what I've learned is that real love isn't about never struggling. It's about choosing each other even when struggling would be easier. It's about showing up and fighting and refusing to give up on something that matters. Daniel, Mia, you two have shown all of us what that looks like, and we're better for witnessing it. He raised his glass higher, to the bride and groom, and to the kind of love that survives distance, doubt, and my terrible matchmaking skills. Everyone drank to that, and Mia squeezed Daniel's hand under the table, her eyes bright with happy tears. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and stories, and Carter falling asleep against Mia's shoulder while the adults lingered over coffee and dessert. When they finally got home, Daniel carried Carter to bed while Mia followed, both of them tucking him in together like they did every night. Standing in his doorway watching their son sleep, Daniel felt the weight of tomorrow settle over him. Not heavy, but significant. Tomorrow everything would change and nothing would change. They'd make promises they'd already been keeping, claim a future they'd already started building. You ready for this? Mia whispered, taking his hand as they walked back to their bedroom. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Saturday morning dawned clear and perfect, the October sky that particular shade of blue that only came in autumn. Daniel woke early, unable to sleep through his nerves and excitement, and found Mia already awake beside him. I thought you'd be at your parents' hotel getting ready, he said. I wanted one more morning waking up next to you before we do this officially. She turned to face him, her hair spread across the pillow, and her smile soft. After today, I'll be your wife. You're already my partner in everything that matters. This is just making it official. I know, but it still feels huge. Good huge or scary huge? The best huge. She kissed him gently. I should go. My mom's probably having a panic attack about my hair, and I need to get into my dress, and Carter's probably already awake demanding to know when we're leaving for Cooperstown. She was right about Carter, who appeared in their doorway approximately 2 minutes after Mia left, fully dressed in his suit at 7 in the morning, even though they didn't need to leave for 3 more hours. Is it time yet? Can we go? Is Mia already there? Will she really be my mom after today? Daniel pulled his son onto the bed. Yes to the last one, no to everything else. We've got plenty of time. Want to help me get ready? Carter took his job seriously, helping Daniel with his tie and making sure his shoes were shined and his hair was combed just right. By the time they loaded into the truck with Marcus riding shotgun and Amy following in her car, Carter was vibrating with excitement. The drive to Cooperstown felt both endless and too short. Daniel's hands were sweating on the steering wheel, and Marcus kept up a steady stream of commentary designed to keep him from panicking. You know the best part of you and Mia getting married? Marcus said as they pulled into town. What's that? I never have to set you up on another blind date again. That was exhausting. Daniel laughed despite his nerves. You set me up once. Yeah, and look how much drama that one date caused. I'm retiring from matchmaking. My success rate is too high to risk messing it up. The inn was beautiful, the gardens overlooking the lake even more stunning than the photos had suggested. White chairs were set up in neat rows, and flowers were everywhere, simple arrangements of autumn colors that matched the leaves just starting to turn. Mia's mother met them at the entrance, directing Daniel and Carter to the groom's suite while she went to check on the bride. She's nervous, Mia's mother confided, but so happy. I've never seen her like this. In the groom's suite, Daniel straightened his tie for the 5th time while Carter and Marcus tried to convince him that everything was going to be perfect. His hands were shaking slightly when he pinned on his boutonniere, and Carter noticed. Dad, it's okay to be nervous. Mia's probably nervous too, but you love each other, so it's going to be okay. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best, Carter said seriously, and Daniel had to hug him to hide the fact that he was getting emotional before the ceremony even started. The guests arrived, filling the white chairs with familiar faces. Daniel's mother hugged him so tight he could barely breathe, telling him how proud his father would have been. Mia's brother clapped him on the shoulder and welcomed him to the family officially. The string quartet started playing, and suddenly it was time. Daniel walked out with Marcus to stand at the front, facing the rows of chairs and the lake beyond. His heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone must be able to hear it. Then the music changed, and Carter came down the aisle walking very slowly and carefully, the ring pillow held in front of him like it contained the most precious cargo in the world. When he reached the front, he grinned at Daniel. I didn't drop them. Good job, buddy. Go stand over there with Uncle Marcus. Then the bride's music started, and everyone stood, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Mia appeared at the end of the aisle, flanked by her father on one side and her brother on the other. Her dress was simple and elegant, flowing white fabric that moved with her as she walked. Her hair was down in waves around her shoulders, and she carried a bouquet of autumn flowers that matched the ones scattered throughout the garden. But what stopped Daniel's heart was her smile, radiant and sure and aimed directly at him like he was the only person in the world. She walked toward him, her father moving slowly but steadily with his walker, and Daniel had to blink hard to keep from crying. When they reached the front, Robert Harper shook Daniel's hand and then carefully pulled him into a hug. Take care of my girl, he said quietly. With everything I have, sir. Then Mia was standing in front of him, and Daniel took her hands, and the officiant started speaking, but Daniel barely heard the words. He was too focused on Mia's face, on the way her eyes were shining with happy tears, on the way she squeezed his hands like she was anchoring herself to this moment. When it came time for vows, Mia went first. Daniel, a year and a half ago I agreed to a blind date I almost canceled 3 times. I thought it would be awkward and uncomfortable and that we'd never see each other again. Instead, I found my best friend, my partner, and the family I didn't know I was looking for. You taught me that love isn't about never struggling. It's about choosing each other through the struggles. You showed me what it means to show up even when it's hard, even when it's scary. Today I'm choosing you forever, and I promise to keep choosing you every single day for the rest of our lives. Daniel's turn came, and his voice was rough with emotion. Mia, I spent a long time thinking I had to do everything alone, that asking for help or letting someone in meant I was weak or failing somehow. Then you came along and showed me that strength looks like vulnerability, that love looks like partnership, that family can be built by choice just as much as by blood. You've given me and Carter a home that's bigger than just a house. You've given us hope and joy and a future I'm excited to build. I promise to support your dreams the way you support mine. I promise to fight for us instead of running when things get hard. And I promise to love you and Carter with everything I am for as long as I live. The officiant asked for the rings, and Carter stepped forward very seriously, presenting the pillow without dropping it. Daniel slipped the band onto Mia's finger, and she did the same for him, and when the officiant said, "You may kiss your bride," Daniel pulled Mia close and kissed her while everyone cheered and Carter yelled, "Yeah!" from where he was standing with Marcus. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Wright. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and Daniel felt like he was floating. At the end of the aisle, Mia stopped and turned to Carter, who'd run after them. "Come here, sweetheart. You're part of this too." Carter wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stood there for a moment, the three of them together, while the guests filed past toward the reception. Daniel looked at his wife, and his son, and felt a gratitude so profound it almost hurt. The reception was everything a wedding should be. Good food, better company, toasts that made everyone laugh and cry. Mia's father danced with her for the father-daughter dance, moving slowly but surely while everyone watched with happy tears. Daniel danced with his mother, with Amy, with Mia's mother. But his favorite dance was the last one of the night, when the DJ called all the families with children to the floor, and Daniel and Mia danced with Carter between them, the three of them moving together while Carter giggled and stepped on both their feet. "This is the best day ever," Carter declared, "even better than Christmas." "Even better than your birthday?" Mia asked. "Way better, because now we're a real family forever." "We were always a real family," Daniel said. "The wedding just makes it official." When the reception finally wound down and the last guest trickled away, Daniel and Mia stood in the garden where they'd gotten married, looking out at the lake in the moonlight. Carter had fallen asleep in Mia's mother's arms and been carried off to bed in the bridal suite where they'd be staying the night. "We did it," Mia said softly. "We're actually married." "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I almost didn't go on that blind date. Think of all the time we could have had together if I hadn't been so stubborn. But then we wouldn't have this story. We wouldn't have fought for each other and learned what we're capable of. Sometimes the long way around is the right way." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Besides, we've got the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." They stood there for a while longer, wrapped in each other in the quiet of the October night. Tomorrow they'd drive back to Syracuse and start their married life. They'd go back to work and school and the ordinary rhythms of family life. Eventually, Daniel would save enough to start his restoration shop, and they'd add on to the house, and maybe Carter would get a little brother or sister if that's what happened, or maybe it would just be the three of them, and that would be perfect too. But tonight, on the day they'd promised each other forever, Daniel Wright thought about the journey that had brought them here, about the blind date that almost didn't happen, about the woman who'd seen him not as a single father with too much baggage, but as a man worth knowing, about the love they'd lost and fought to reclaim, about second chances and showing up and choosing each other every single day. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on us, even when I'd given up, for coming back, for being exactly who you are." Mia turned in his arms to face him, her wedding dress glowing white in the moonlight, her smile the same one that had stopped his heart that first night at the restaurant. "Thank you for driving to Cooperstown when I thought it was over, for fighting for us when I was too scared to fight for myself, for showing me what love really looks like." "What does it look like?" "Like this, like us, like showing up for each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. like building something real together, one day at a time. She kissed him softly, like coming home. And standing there in the garden where they'd just promised their lives to each other, with their son asleep upstairs and a future full of possibilities stretching ahead, Daniel Wright knew exactly what she meant. This was home, not a place, but a person. Not a destination, but a choice made every day to show up, to love, to build something lasting together. He'd almost stayed home that February night, almost let fear keep him from this. But he'd taken the chance, walked into that restaurant, met a woman with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. And she'd taken a chance on him too, on a single father with oil under his fingernails and a 6-year-old who loved dinosaurs. Together they'd built something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them needed. A family, a home, a love worth fighting for. And as Daniel held his wife in the moonlight, listening to her heartbeat against his chest, and thinking about the little boy sleeping upstairs who called them both his parents now, he knew with absolute certainty that every hard moment, every tear, every mile driven, and every difficult conversation had been worth it. This was what love looked like. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth every moment of struggle. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A story they'd written together, full of mistakes and second chances, and the decision to keep choosing each other no matter what came next. The single father who almost didn't go on that blind date had found more than love. He'd found partnership, purpose, and proof that the best things in life often came from the chances you almost didn't take. And he'd found home.